I kindly ask to all the participants if they can turn off their microphones so we don't have a problem with noise. So now we're going to start officially the session. Good evening to everyone. My name is Michelle Quiñones Guzman. I am Habesha Project's General Coordinator, and I have today the great pleasure of introducing you to all to Mr. Tahsin Timur Söymelez, Ambassador of the Republic of Turkey to Mexico. I also want to acknowledge the special presence of Ms. Berrak Kekesh, Third Secretary at the Turkish Embassy in Mexico. Since the beginning of his administration in Mexico, Ambassador Söymelez has been a wonderful ally of this humanitarian initiative. We had the pleasure of receiving him in Aguascalientes in January of 2019, and since then we have always counted with his support and constant advice. This is why, on behalf of Habesha Project, I want to share with Ambassador Söymelez how honored we are by his presence in this event. I want to also thank all the Habesha Project student committee members and Habesha Project and Habesha America's beneficiary students that are joining us. This session will start with Ambassador Söymelez generously sharing with all of us his vision about the current global situation, especially about the current context in Syria, and particularly about the important work that Turkey has done regarding the reception of more than 3 million refugees. Subsequently, there will be time for questions by the participants, so if any of you would like to ask a question to the ambassador at the end of his discourse, please ask for the word in the chat. So each of you have the opportunity to open the microphone and camera and ask the ambassador directly. This session will be held in English, but if there is anyone who wants to ask a question in Spanish, I'll be totally glad to help with the translation. With nothing else to add, I now give the floor to the distinguished Ambassador of the Republic of Turkey, Ambassador Tahsin Timur Söymelez.
Well, thank you very much. Buenas tardes. It's a real pleasure to be with you all today. Let me first recognize, of course, my good friend Adrian and you, Michelle, from the Habesha Project. Really, ever since my arrival here in Mexico, I've seen firsthand the good work that you do here in Mexico, but also for Syrians. It's a really laudable, very important contribution that you are doing. And whatever help that we've been able to provide, whether through me or through our development agency, has been a real pleasure for us. I do remember very fondly our visit to Aguascalientes. It was really very enjoyable. We made new friends there, visited your office, and we were just chatting before the beginning of the meeting, but I look forward to developing the relationship further and supporting the Habesha Project in any way that we can going forward. Now, globally, I mean, it's the question when you look at 20 is where do we start? It's really been a crazy year, and we're really hoping that the last 2 weeks transpire and we make it to 2021 without any more craziness. I mean, people are saying, an asteroid maybe is going to hit, or zombies are going to invade Earth. That's about the only thing that hasn't happened in 2020. But of course, the good news is the human nature is very adaptable. It's very malleable. And we have adapted to the new circumstances. We have adapted to the pandemic. And we are ending the year, I think, with good news. I mean, there has been a lot going on, and we can get into the details of some of the things that have been going on around, especially Turkey. But I mean, when we look at the situation globally, I think we're ending 2020 more or less on a positive note. Of course, first and foremost, we have a vaccine. We have several vaccines. All of the vaccines have proven to be anywhere between 90-95% successful, and there's mass production going on. Multiple different tests are at the stage of being finalized. So there's good news. Vaccination programs are being announced all over the world, including in Mexico. I was looking actually at a graph of all Latin American countries in terms of how prepared they are for vaccination. And Mexico is number one in all of the Americas, actually, in being prepared for vaccinating its own population. So that has to be a very good news. And I think that as we go towards the summer, if we make it through this winter. I mean, this winter is going to be challenging, but once we make it through this winter, I think with the summer months and then with the early autumn, we're going to be able to slowly return to normal, which is, I think, what everybody's looking forward to, because of course, there are economic repercussions to this pandemic. There are social repercussions to this pandemic. And of course, people want to go back to normal. People don't want to be stuck in front of their screens in their houses indefinitely. So that's one piece of good news. The other piece of good news, if I may share that sincerely, of course, is what happened on November 3rd in the United States. I think we all couldn't breathe anymore in terms of what was going on in the United States and how it was affecting not only directly, of course, Mexico in many ways, but affecting the globe, affecting, let's say, the well-being of everybody around the world. So change, I think, is very welcome in the United States, and hopefully that will trickle all across the globe. Now, of course, the challenges to the globe remain. One of the biggest challenges, and of course, thinking back to the election in the United States and hopefully how that will change developments on a more global scale, is climate change. I mean, we cannot not talk about how important climate change is and what it means for the future. I mean, we have a small window left to really act, to take serious steps to curtail global warming. And if we don't, then we will suffer, but more importantly, the generation after us will suffer even more. I mean, I think we all know where this is going. The other aspect, of course, the pandemic has shown us how weak we are when it comes to facing such a global challenge in such a difficult way. If we had been more prepared for this pandemic, if, for example, we had stockpiled vaccinations, stockpiled PPEs, stockpiled masks, and all those sorts of things that were going to help our healthcare workers, I think the situation would have been much better. But of course, politicians only think about the matters that will help them in the upcoming election. They don't think about the matters that will help humankind 3 or 4 generations on. So hopefully we learn from this experience as well, and going forward are more prepared to work together to not only counter immediate threats like, let's say, terrorism or extremism, that kind of thing, but are also prepared for things that will affect all of us, like a pandemic. I mean, the pandemic, for example, has affected women and children the most in every way, economically, socially, and of course, primarily in a health way. Even though men are more strictly affected, the comprehensive effects have been worse on women and children. So the more prepared we are, the more aware we are together as a global community, I think will help us as we move forward to move away from, let's say, more parochial interests and fears to more global ones. There are other extinction level events that we know are out there and we are completely unprepared. So hopefully, I think as we end 2020, we end it on a positive note, on a more, let's say, shared community notion vision. Now, when we look at developments in 2020, recent developments, I mean, you're looking at developments in Europe, you're looking at developments in Asia. There's a lot going on, but the pandemic has really, of course, taken over our imagination and has made our immediate life very difficult. So we're thinking of that. But a lot of other things have been going on. I will get to Syria, of course. But when you look at the region around Turkey, there is really not been a dull moment over the last 12 months. You've seen war in Karabakh. Azerbaijan has finally, after 30 years of occupation, liberated its territory and is now in the process of returning up to 1 million IDPs back to their homes. This was the war is never welcome, but I think the agreement that was signed at the end with the supervision of Russia and with the inclusion of Turkey between Azerbaijan and Armenia has allowed for the IDPs to return and humanitarian aid to flow, etc. So that's ending, I think, 2020 in a good note. We've had, let's say, less than calm waters in the Eastern Mediterranean, but not really issues of real conflict, but some, for sure, push and shove developments with regard to Iran. There have been some very interesting developments in the Middle East with regard to Israel. Some countries now normalizing their relationship with Israel. So that's definitely something to watch out for. There's normalization in the Gulf. As you may know, as you all may have followed, there were difficulties and in fact crisis between some of the Gulf countries. So now we're overcoming that. So that's good news. So there's really a lot. There's really been in 2020 a lot of hotspots, a lot of issues we have to separately and collectively pay attention to. And of course, all of these issues happen in the periphery of Turkey, are happening all around Turkey, which for sure affect our security, affect our economic well-being, of course, trigger migration. And this is really one of the biggest issues, one of the biggest challenges that humankind is faced with. It's an age-old issue. We've talked about this multiple times with Adrian and the Habesha project. I mean, people have been migrating as long as they have been able to walk, basically. This is a basic, let's say, act, and it will continue. There is no preventing migration. The important thing is to be able to regulate it, is to be able to make sure that it happens in a safe, dignified way, and that, of course, it happens within the respect of international law and the laws of the governing each and every country. It was mentioned, and I will say a few words on that. Turkey at the moment is home to the largest refugee community globally. This is not only our numbers, but this is also UNHCR numbers. We have upwards of 4 million refugees from different places. Now, those are from, and of course, of them have come to Turkey fleeing oppression and persecution and the civil war that started in Syria in 2010, 2011. We have opened our doors. We have had an open door policy for Syrians ever since the beginning of the civil war in Syria. And we continue that policy. And of course, for us, it's very, very important because, you know, before the Republic of Turkey was created, under the Ottoman Empire, which existed for around 650 years, we had a history of welcoming those around us who were fleeing persecution. I mean, this goes back to the Spanish Inquisition, where Jews fleeing Spain and the Inquisition were able to find safe refuge in the Ottoman Empire. And that tradition kept on, kept being alive throughout the centuries. And so maintaining that tradition, we could not turn a blind eye while our neighbor's home was being burnt. You know, we have a saying in Turkish that if your neighbor's house is burning, you better do something about it, because your house is going to burn very soon too if you don't pay appropriate. So we did. First of all, we opened our doors and we provided temporary protection for now up to more than 3.6 million Syrians. It's very important here to remember that a very small fraction of those Syrians are actually in the temporary camps that we created for them on the border with Syria. About 50,000 of them are still in these camps, which of course provide all manner of health care, and there are school camps and social centers. So you know, they're not living in tents. They're actually living in quite comfortable settings when you compare it to other refugee camps around the world. But the rest, I mean, a huge majority, so more than around 3.6 million living in city outside Turkey. There are three or four different major cities where the concentration is the largest. But the important thing to point out is, first and foremost, they get free healthcare. So Syrians who are under temporary protection in Turkey have access to universal healthcare in Turkey. And the numbers are quite large, actually, in terms of how many Syrians have been able to receive operations and were able to meet with doctors, are receiving healthcare, etc. The second important title is education. We have now close to 1.2 million Syrians in Turkey who are at different points of their life in education. And around 750,000 of those are again being educated within the Turkish educational system, completely free of charge. I saw a very interesting statistic. 50 the immediate number is in front of me. I couldn't see it right now, but who are receiving this is together very important component of how we are helping our Syrian brethren. The third important aspect, of course, is access to the labor market. This again always is a challenge for a lot of refugees in the countries that they live. In Turkey, starting from 2016, our Syrian friends have access to the Turkish labor market and are able to get work permits and work inside Turkey. So, of course, this is a very important development. This is that they can take care of their families and have a safe and secure, unified, and prosperous life. Of course, and we will get to that. One of the other things that we are trying to do is we are trying to promote safe and voluntary return of Syrians to Syria, should the circumstances allow. Now, over the past 3 years, the immediate vicinity to our border, which is about 1,000-kilometer border, it's our longest border with any country, longest land border with any country. We have been conducting operations south of the border, especially against Daesh and also some other terrorist elements, and also the Assad regime, to try to create safe zones where basically Syrians are living there, don't feel the need to escape Syria and try to go into Turkey or through Turkey to other places, but also that so that they can stay, but also from those regions can safely, if they voluntarily, turn to their homes and rebuild their lives in their own country. So that's a fourth aspect. And of course, that has several different components. I mean, one is the fight against these terrorist elements that exist, taking advantage of the vacuum in northern Syria, but also pushing back against the Assad regime, which is trying to use conventional weapons and also weapons of mass destruction, as we've all seen with chemical weapons, against the legitimate Syrian opposition, which has a foothold in northern Syria. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to work with the Russians, with the Iranians, and also indirectly with the Assad regime to de-escalate the situation, to make sure there is no more military conflict on the ground, so that we can slowly go back to a political solution, a negotiated solution, which meets the aspirations of the Syrian people, so that the situation in Syria can be stable and hopefully in the future prosperous and at peace with each other. I mean, Turkey would like nothing more than Syria, within its current borders, territorially integral, to be at peace with itself and be run in a democratic way, in whichever under whichever leader or political party or regime its people legitimately choose for it. And for this, under the UN, based on UN Security Council Resolution 2254, there are several mechanisms. There's a Geneva process. There's a constitutional committee that has been set up, and Turkey is supporting all of these processes to make sure to hopefully to push the process forward so that everyone, all of the Syrians from different sides of conflict can come together and hopefully bring about a peaceful solution to their own internal conflict. At this point in time, of course, we find ourselves in a difficult position. Why? Because the pandemic has further complicated the humanitarian reality on the ground. Last year, we were looking at 4 to 5 million people inside Syria that needed humanitarian aid. Now that number has increased around 40, 50%. Now we're talking about around almost 8 to 9 million people who need humanitarian aid. And Turkey alone, if you count the 3.6 million in Turkey, and then all of the people that we are sending humanitarian aid to inside Syria, Turkey alone is taking care of around 9 million Syrians, which is almost half the population of Syria. Of course, we're getting help. We're getting help from the UN agencies. We're getting some help. We have a deal with the European Union. We wish that it would work better, but it is working. It's not working 100%. Let's say it's working at around 50%, but it is working, so that's a help. But the international community needs to do more. Unfortunately, the pandemic has put a lot of these major humanitarian crises on the back burner, and people have lost focus. People were already, unfortunately, losing focus, in particular, the United States and Europe. They only care when it's an issue about migration. They care less about the immediate reality that we confront in Syria, which is one of military warfare, which is one of civil war, with outside powers interfering, and a regime that is oppressing its own people, at times having used weapons of mass destruction, which normally is unfathomable, have paid essentially no price for doing that. Will ultimately, I do believe, justice is always around the corner, but the world has looked the other way, and I think we need to do more to capture the attention of the international community to Syria and the plight of the Syrians. And we will keep doing that, obviously. But when you look at all of the things that we have done, I think it's safe to say that Turkey has really shouldered the burden here. Of course, Lebanon and Jordan have been very much affected. Countries that are not as economically sound as Turkey, as not as big as Turkey. Turkey is a G20 member, NATO member, one of the largest economies in the world. So obviously, whatever we can do more, we will. But the challenges are there, and they are serious. But we will keep doing whatever we can, basically because we believe, I think correctly, that if there is a problem in your region, it's only a matter of time before it hits you as well. So we need to work together to find solutions. Let me stop there. There's a lot of issues around Turkey that I can talk about, and I'm happy to talk about. But my focus, of course, our focus has been on Syria because it very much affects also the situation in Turkey. But of course, I'm open to any other questions as well, including the bilateral relationship with Turkey and between Turkey and Mexico. And I didn't mention that, but it's a very good one. It's a very strong one. We're trying to develop it in many other ways. But let me stop there and take the discussion forward based on questions.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sagremas, for sharing with us such an interesting vision about the general issues that we're currently facing, and also the situation of refugees from Syria and Turkey. I don't know if there's anyone that would like to ask a question. I haven't received anything in the chat yet, but while someone text, maybe I can begin with a question that came to my mind about the big challenge that it could have been for Turkey regarding the integration of more than 4 million refugees. Like, how has Turkey faced this challenge about the academic, medical, housing integration of all this population?
Well, I mean, I would be lying if I said that it was easy. It was not easy, and it started actually happening overnight. I mean, we had not planned for this. We did not expect the crisis in Syria to unfold in this way. So we had not planned initially for such a huge number of refugees to come through from Syria, and also through Syria and Iraq into Turkey. Of course, we did not also anticipate the reaction from Europe in terms of being completely closed to this wave of migration, building fences, building walls, preventing boats from crossing the Aegean, at times sinking boats. I mean, these are, I think, chapters in our lifetimes that we will all remember, photographs of deceased children washing up on shores. I mean, this is, we will all remember this, but I think we will all remember this and maybe hopefully cling to our humanity a little bit more. In Turkey, one of the first things, of course, we did was we had to set up temporary camps to first bring in and give shelter and, of course, livelihood to the Syrians who were coming in, and to be able to process them, because not all of them are going to be able to stay in these camps. They're going to proceed. You cannot force migrants to stay in a certain place. If they want to keep moving, they have a right to keep moving in a regular way. So the first challenge was setting up these camps. And I remember I was in Ankara at the time. Some of our very dear friends representing the richest countries in the world would tell us that the standards that we were providing in these camps were too high, were putting them to other countries to shame, that we were essentially raising the standard globally for migrants. And we said we'll take that as a compliment, because these people are not coming here because they choose to. They're not coming here because one day they decided to leave everything behind and let's go across the border and see what we can find in Turkey. No, they're coming here because they're fleeing for their lives. And so we owe it to ourselves, not to them, but we owe it to our own humanity to provide proper shelter and proper food and education and healthcare and social services to these people. So that was the immediate challenge. And then, of course, we had to create the right things. We had to power up certain institutions, those institutions that were providing humanitarian aid to the migrant populations, and then those institutions that were processing them in terms of giving them IDs, making records of them, etc., and then processing their applications through UNHCR to become refugees or not, to move on, etc. So that's another very obviously cumbersome and complicated process. Then we had to work with our health sector to power up. I mean, we have a very strong health sector in Turkey. I had told Adrian mentioned it. We have a very strong health sector, and we've done actually quite well, knock on wood, with regard to the pandemic. So we had to work with our health sector to make sure that they could take on this additional weight. And then, of course, we had to work within the educational system to open up educational means for the Syrian children who need to be able to go to school. Otherwise, it's going to be a lost generation, which is, the worst situation you can create, because it's a fertile ground for all sorts of extremism and radicalization, etc. So you definitely don't want that. You want to be able to give them the means to get a good education, so they can go on to higher education, whether in Turkey or around the world, and provide for themselves in a feasible manner. So it was a very complicated operation, but I have to say that it happened with minimal difficulty. Let's say the Turkish people showed their traditional hospitality, which is something that we share with the Mexican people. They welcomed the Syrians in open arms. There was friction here and there. We shouldn't sugarcoat it. I mean, it's not easy. 3.5 million, 4 million people entering a country of 80 million. That's a very large number. It's a large percentage. So, I mean, it's 6% of the population, more or less. So, there was friction here and there, but overall, I think the integration has not been very difficult. But let's also remember that this is a temporary situation. I mean, Syrians in Turkey and the other migrants in Turkey are under our temporary protection. They are not all under refugee status based on international law. Some of them are receiving refugee status. They're moving on to other countries, etc. Some of them are staying on in Turkey, getting Turkish citizenship. Those who are born in Turkey have path to Turkish citizenship, etc. So it's not a homogeneous situation, to say the least. But we've done well, and variety is a fabric of a strong society. We don't think that we are worse off. We think that we will be, in the medium to long term, better off. But of course, we are working to create the means for Syrians to return to Turkey, to return to Syria, should the circumstances allow, but also to move on to other countries if they so desire, and those other countries are willing to take them. So it's a very, very complicated matter involving many different agencies and many different processes. And of course, lots of new rules and regulations and laws have been put in place, including, for example, passing a law to allow access to the job market. We're doing our best. I can't say that it's perfect. I'm sure it's not perfect. But we're doing our best, and future generations will look to this example and commend Turkey for what it has done in this time of crisis.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador Söylemez. Edna Sofia has a question. I don't know, Edna, if you want to ask it directly, opening your microphone.
Sure. Sorry, I cannot turn on my camera, but I was wondering, Mr. Ambassador, what would happen to Turkey on NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, with the the sanction that the US imposed on Turkey after buying the Russian defense? So I don't know, what do you think about that? Like, what would happen to the NATO organization?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't worry about that too much. I've spent a significant part of my career working on NATO issues. Turkey has been a member of NATO for a very long time, 70 years almost. And throughout those decades, we've had our ups and downs with the United States. In the 1970s, the United States Congress, actually, much to the chagrin of the White House at the time, imposed an arms embargo, a total arms embargo on Turkey, which lasted quite some years. But even at that time, Turkey was still a full-fledged member of NATO. Turkey participated and contributed to NATO, probably much more than a lot of our allies in a very difficult neighborhood. And we made it through that difficult time. It's true, we do have some, let's say, not misunderstandings, but differences of opinion with the United States about which way we should proceed with our defense industry. You know, I was in Ankara at the time. Our primary choice for our air defenses was not the Russian air defense system. It was the American Patriot system. But there were two difficulties. One, with the Patriot system, the American government was not ready to share technology with us. With an ally, a NATO ally of 60, 70 years, they did not want to share the technology. Secondly, even if we paid for the Patriot system, they did not guarantee delivery of it, because they said if Congress doesn't green light the delivery of those weapons, well, sorry, you can't have. So what kind of a customer goes forward with a deal like that? I mean, you pay for it, you only get off the shelf. They don't share any of the technology with you, even though you're developing your own defense industry and you've shared technology. You know, the F-16 platform, for example, the airplanes, the fighter jets, we developed together with the US. Turkey develops very important technology for the F-16s right now, including within the targeting system in the cockpit. So why can't we develop other aspects of air defense systems? And secondly, you're paying for it, but you're not guaranteed delivery. So this is a long-standing issue. And, you know, we are not the only NATO ally that has bought Russian hardware. Greece in the 1990s also bought Russian S-300s, as they were called at the time, but they were not sanctioned. I don't know why. But right now, yes, it's true that these sanctions have been put in place. If you look at the spectrum of sanctions that could have been levied on Turkey, you could make the argument that we introduced were not really, were not really 100% of what they could be doing, maybe not even 50%, but it's something we're going to have to work through. But I don't think it affects our partnership within NATO. Why? Because NATO is a defensive alliance. NATO is working to defend, let's say, the democratic world against many threats. And Turkey has the second largest standing army in NATO, has a very advanced and, let's say, combat-ready military. So NATO stands to always benefit from Turkey's membership. I can count a lot of countries in Europe who don't provide anything near what Turkey provides to NATO. So I think our existence in NATO and our partnership with our allies will continue because we need each other, and we will continue to need each other, and we will work through this. We will work through this difficulty, as we have done with others in the past.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ambassador. Adrian, you had some questions. You want to open your mic?
Okay, thank you very much. I have 1,000 questions, but I see there's other questions. But coming back to our issues, I mean, those related to the work of what we do, which is the humanitarian work. Now, I probably am concerned about the finance of Habesha, and given the fact that we live from funding, especially from agencies. And right now, for every country, even those wealthy countries who have big funds for international development and humanitarian assistance, I guess it's not a priority. I guess now everyone is in the mood of self-survival, and I'm afraid personally that now that we talk about the world after this pandemic. This is not going to be a priority, that the economies are going to be so affected that even countries who generally fund these big initiatives, I mean, not Habesha, but the UN, and UN funds us, the budgets are going to shrink, and definitely is not going to be a priority for anybody, for no country. How do you see that, Ambassador? And specifically, can you give us what is the situation, for example, with an agency, like an agency of TICA, which is, I think, very particular and very generous, especially coming from a country that is not one of the, like, is not the US, is not the Europe, etc. Is like in the case of TICA, would that be they're basically shrinking, or it? I mean, that question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, Adrian, and I think you're right to be worried in some respects, but I think also there's things to be optimistic about. With regard to TICA, yes, there is our International Development Agency. I am hearing that there are constraints on its budget, but let me tell you that when we had just recently, last month, the floods in Tabasco and Chiapas, we were able to provide approximately 1 million peso worth of aid, direct aid, to those affected by the floods. So, you know, when push comes to shove, we're still able to make it happen. Now, you're right. I mean, global economies are very heavily affected by the pandemic. And, you know, Mexico is the exception here, and we'll see, you know, whether this was the right decision or not. But, you know, almost all of the G20 countries have introduced huge stimulus packages through their private sector, or directly through agencies, or directly to populations, to provide aid to keep not only the economy afloat, but also to keep people and small businesses afloat. Now, of course, this means borrowing. It means borrowing from your own savings and from the international financial system. So to what extent that international financial system remains solvent, it looks like it's remaining solvent. You know, the G20 is, they just had, the Saudi Arabia had its final summit virtually. And, you know, there's going to be a lot of support for international financial institutions to keep the global system afloat. But of course, in a couple of years' time, you're going to have to start paying back all of these loans that we have taken out to keep ourselves afloat. So that's something in the future. Mexico didn't do that, and I think that was a very interesting. I mean, that's another discussion, but it was a very interesting way to go. But of course, then that may have socioeconomic repercussions. You know, there's always a give and take. You know, your job as a politician is to make a decision. There's never a decision that is 100% in your benefit. You're always giving something, and you're always taking or giving up something. So it remains to be seen. I think in terms of humanitarian aid, again, as I mentioned, the fundamental change that hopefully we're about to see in the United States will help. The return in whatever manner of the United States to the international system, to the multinational framework, I think will encourage a lot of other countries also to go back to the ways of cooperation that we had sort of memorized and taken for granted. You know, we're talking about the United States that withdrew not only from the Paris Accords, but withdrew from the WHO, withdrew from UNRWA. I mean, if some of the people participating, if they don't know what UNRWA is, it's the UN Relief Works Agency. It is one of the oldest UN programs that helps Palestinian refugees, more than almost 6 million Palestinian refugees scattered around inside Palestine, in Lebanon, in Jordan, all over the place, who are living in squalid conditions in maybe their third, fourth generations, and they only have UNRWA to look forward to. And the US was the biggest contributor to UNRWA. And overnight, they pulled out and they stopped paying anything to Rwanda. Of course, countries like Turkey and European countries then had to step up and support UNRWA. But I think with the return of the United States, you're going to see more commitment from also other major countries. And, look, it's going to be a struggle. It's not going to be easy. And we're going to have to remind people why this is important. We can't take this support for granted. We're going to have to explain to them over and over and over why these programs are crucial, not only for the recipients, but for all those who are supporting these programs. And also because, as decent human beings who purport to being somewhat civilized, we should care for those who are less advantageous than us. So it is going to be difficult. I think the pandemic certainly has created an additional challenge in this area, which was already, challenging. But we have to work through it. The faces have not changed. The people have not changed. The challenges have not changed. The appropriation of the financial means available to us has changed somewhat. And so we are going to have to work to reappropriate those funds depending on the situation. So yes, I mean, it's going to be difficult. I wouldn't sugarcoat it in any way, but I think we'll be able to work through it. I'm pretty sure we will.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Stephanie Luna asked for a question in Spanish, and I will try to translate it as well as I can. So she states, how does Turkey handle the topic regarding security and migrants' human rights? As we have seen in Europe and in the United States, sometimes migrants are cataloged as groups that might generate violence or that are part of criminal groups, just as in the same way that sometimes Mexicans that migrate to the United States are judged. So what advice can you give us to deal or to handle this kind of prejudice towards migrants?
Well, I mean, the hardest question, the hardest part of the question came at the end. I mean, handling prejudices is not easy, but let's first of all remember that in the case of Turkey and Syrian refugees is not similar to the case of Mexican migrants in the US. The case that is more similar to Mexican migrants in the US is Turkish migrants in Germany. That's where there's a lot of similarities. Syrians have, by and large, integrated into the Turkish community with great success. They've learned the language very quickly. Arabic, Turkish and Arabic are not sister languages, but Turkey uses a lot of Arabic words, and Arabic speakers are able to learn Turkish much easier than Turkish speakers learning Arabic. So the language barrier has not been that difficult. Secondly, there were already very close links between Turkish people and Syrian people. Aleppo, the city of Aleppo, had more economic links with the city of Gaziantep in Turkey than it did with Damascus. Damascus and Aleppo were like Guadalajara and Mexico City, sort of evil twins, never competing with each other, never really being very close with each other. And so the bonds were already there, the trade was already there. A lot of Syrians had relatives in Turkey, knew people in Turkey, would also travel to Turkey. So the integration in that regard was not that difficult. Now, in terms of radicalization and criminalization, of course, this is an ongoing threat. And this is why, for example, access to healthcare, access to education, access to the job market, making sure that you don't create these monikers of illegal aliens and putting people in a place where they feel like they are the other. No, they are here under a temporary regime. They are not citizens of the country. They may have a path, depending on their situation, to citizenship. But as long as they are there, they have a dignified life. They are able to get healthcare. They're able to send their kids to school. They're able to participate in the workplace and look forward to a safe future, a secure future, whether they want to move forward to another country, they want to go back to Syria, or they want to stay in a hold pattern. It's up to them. Now, of course, radicalization and criminalization is always a problem. Education is one way of battling it, but you also have to pay very close attention, because you have these open borders, and all sorts of let's say undesirable people can also come through the borders. So we have different agencies in Turkey who are paying very close attention, to mosques and to social centers, and to listening in on different conversations to make sure that these communities are not radicalized, that they are not incentivized to do anything criminal. But it's an ongoing challenge, of course, as in any country. You have to pay very close attention to it and act when you see something going on, sort of nip it in the bud, because otherwise it grows and it becomes a bigger problem. So far, we have not had any major problems, nothing that I'm aware of in terms of organization or radicalization, etc. It's not to say that we won't. We have to pay attention to it. The last part of the question, of course, prejudices. Look, prejudices are always there. There is always a friction between host communities and migrant communities. There are flare-ups here and there. The important thing is to give the right messages from politicians and from leaders in community, opinion makers, to say, look, these people are no different from you. They've come from maybe a different place, but they are just the same as you. And, we are all going to get along. We're going to be fine. So you have to keep staying on message, I think. And historically, we've done well in that regard, but we have to keep it up. That some politician starts to play with this issue and tries to use it as a banner. We have to be vigilant against such people because they're everywhere.
Thank you, Ambassador. Stephanie says thank you as well. Amjad Al-Sikh asks in the chat, regarding Turkey's accession to European Union, in your personal opinion, is Turkey closer to joining European Union, and what has been the main obstacle that delayed the joining?
Well, this is I worked on this issue for many years. And when I was a younger diplomat, I was a very strong believer in European integration, and that Turkey had a very strong future in Europe, and that we would become a member sooner rather than later. Unfortunately, developments have not proven me right. If anything, they have proven me wrong. Politics in Europe has not been very favorable towards Turkey's accession. I would have to say that we have not been perfect, maybe. We have not fulfilled all of the standards that we needed to fulfill. But politics in Europe has evolved in such a way that our membership to the European Union, while it's still very much alive, the process is still very much alive, is not something that I think I will see before I retire. So, I won't tell you exactly when I'm retiring, but I think that it's going to be a long process. I think it's going to be a drawn-out process. I think it's going to require a lot of concessions on both sides. And I think ultimately it will come down to whether major European countries, and here I mean Germany and France, believe that Turkey has a place in Europe or not. I think it will come down to that. If they are able to develop that strategic vision to have a Europe that can include a Muslim majority country like Turkey, then a way for membership will be found. And we will undergo the necessary reforms that we need to undergo to join the European Union. But I think at this point in time, especially with Brexit and a lot of the other pressures that we're seeing inside Europe, the immediate near future, I don't think is the right time for us to really accelerate this process. But we will keep banging on the door. We will keep this relationship alive, because the important thing to remember is that whether or not Turkey is a member to the European Union, Turkey is a European country. Turkey will always be a European country. Turkey has always in its past been a part of Europe, as much as it has been a part of the East as well. It's, this is another major similarity between Turkey and Mexico. Mexico is North American, Mexico is South American, Mexico is Latin American, Mexico is Caribbean, Mexico is Pacific. And similarly, Turkey is like that as well. We are European, we are Asian, we are Middle Eastern, we have one foot in the Caucasus. Africa, you can swim almost to Africa from Turkey. We are Mediterranean. So all of these identities exist simultaneously in Turkey, and they exist in a way that enriches us. It doesn't make us weaker, it makes us stronger. It gives us more color, just like all of these identities give Mexico more color and more flavor. So it's something that makes us richer. And I don't think not being a member of the European Union, which is at the end of the day an organization, says anything about the European credentials of Turkey. There are countries in Europe which are European in their own way, different from other European countries which are European in their own way. I mean, who's to say that, let's say, Sweden is more European than Portugal, or more European than Albania? So, there's a lot of variety within Europe as well. And we are a part of this bigger mosaic, and we will continue to be. And we will cooperate, of course, intensively, including, for example, on the migration issue with the European Union. We will get angry with them from time to time. They will get angry with us from time to time. But this is a relationship between big countries. This is not a relationship that is easily managed. Big countries have big egos and big attitudes. So those are not easy to navigate sometimes. Our process to the European Union, our accession process to the European Union as a candidate for membership will continue. But in terms of membership, I wouldn't hold my breath.
Perfect, Ambassador. So interesting. Amjad says shukran. And before finishing, Adrian is insisting me so much in giving him the word again. So Adrian, for concluding.
Yes, Ambassador, I wanted to make a more tricky question. So I have, these are quite difficult for you because of your position. So I will give you 3 options and you have to select which one you want to answer. So you can choose one of the 3. So the first is, if you were the president of Mexico, what would be the most important decision you would take in regards to this country to solve the solutions of this country? This is one question. So if you don't want to answer that, you can answer, what are you going to miss from Trump presidency, de la presidencia de Trump? So what are you going to miss from Trump? And if you don't want to answer that, do you know a poem by Rumi? So any of those 3, you can choose one of them and and answer whichever is the easiest.
Thank you. Adrian, first of all, I will never be the president of Mexico. So, it's not possible for me to answer that question. I leave that answer to the other Mexican participants. Second of all, to your second question, not a lot would be my answer. And the third one is I've read a lot of it, but I don't have any memorized. I'm not very good at memorizing poems, but you know, the philosophy of Rumi, understanding the philosophy of Rumi, I think is what is most important. And the basis of that philosophy, I think it can be boiled down to one word, and that is compassion. It is I think, concept that is maybe not unique to humans, but in our history, we've really been able to take it to the highest of peaks when we wanted to. And it is something that we need to have much more of, especially during these difficult times. So that was his message. And I think to the extent that we relate to that message is the extent that we become more civilized, ultimately.
So thank you very much, Ambassador. So I hope then you have to come to Tijuana to inaugurate officially the Rumi Center, which I believe is going
Inshallah.
to be the first Rumi Center in Mexico. Thank you, Ambassador. So these are my questions, and I'm sorry to other participants for taking my position and abusing and taking this. But I'm sure there will be other opportunities to speak to Ambassador Söylemez. And Michelle, I don't know if you have
Yes, I would love to conclude this session asking all of the participants if they can open or turn on their cameras so we can take a picture. It would be great. Awesome. Great. So let's count from 1, 2, 3. Yay! Amazing. Thank you so much to all the Havesha Project student committee members that connected to this session, also to the different beneficiary students that also participated here in this session, and most importantly, thank you very much, Ambassador Tahsin Timur Söylemez, for his presence. We feel very honored to have you here, and I have no doubt that all of the students and all of the participants that attended this session learned a lot and enjoyed this session. So we hope to have your distinguished presence in other events, and hopefully when all these pandemic finish, we could see each other again, whether in Aguascalientes or Mexico City or Tijuana.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all. So see you in another time.
Thank you very much, Ambassador and Madam Barak. Have a lovely evening.
Have a great night. Bye.
Bye.